Hello and welcome to the Public Sector I Heart You podcast. My name is Matthew and I'm delighted to say today that we're joined by Sue Chilton, who is the Chief People Officer at Coventry City Council. Hello, Sue.
Hello.
And Elizabeth Lisle. Elizabeth Lisle is one of our trusted West Midlands Employers Associates, but also the founder of ELA Development. It's good to see you both. And I thought today would be quite interesting, because particularly because Elizabeth, this is really your thing. And I'd be interested in it from a Coventry perspective, I guess, Sue. Is culture development? How do we go about creating culture? Everyone talks about culture and this and that and values and everything else. And I'm just really interested to kind of understand what do you think when we talk about culture, and how does it look and feel in Coventry?
I think culture is about the what you feel and taste when you're in the workplace. That's what I think is culture. What do I think Coventry's like? I think Coventry's pretty good. Yeah. I think it's probably a little bit inconsistent, and that's some of the things that we need to work on. We need to get that position where we feel that everyone's having, that same experience, and that everybody is very clear about what we stand for and what's okay and what's not okay. But that's what I think it's about. I think it's about how you feel at work, how you feel the organisation views you, recognises you, listens to you, responds to you. So I suppose it's about being open, transparent, honest, and ultimately behaviour. That's quite fundamental there, Suzanne. It's behaviour and about, are we living in and behaving in the way that our values are suggesting that, we should and we are. And certainly our values are very employee driven. We've not imposed, we've always gone and sought people's advice. And certainly the last time we did them, we did it with an infoscribe, and that was a very powerful discussion as people are describing what they currently feel versus what they would like to feel, to see someone draw that and bring that to life. So we've got some great, storytelling for those, for our set of values.
And Elizabeth, you do a lot of work across all sorts of different sectors. So I guess you've got that wider view of what culture is all about. I like the idea of storytelling that Sue talks about. What's your take on that?
Very much what Sue's saying, really. I think it's how we do things around here without even thinking, to be honest. So often we have stated, values, artifacts, really. It's about, bottom line is, it's the behaviours, isn't it? It's about how do we live them. And of course, culture is very powerful in terms of performance. Because if we get the culture right, and it links to some of the principles that we talk about co-production, co-creation, engaging with rather than doing to, being timely, being focused. If those are actually evidenced behaviourally, that's what people will describe then when they are reflecting the culture back to you, whether it's through a photograph or a picture.
But culture happens, doesn't it, Sue? Regardless of whether you've got the artifacts you talk about, Elizabeth. But what do we do to sort of make sure that those behaviours sort of come alive inside the organisation? That's always the challenge, isn't it?
It's modelling behaviour.
But that starts with the senior leadership
absolutely.
team, right?
So yes, it does start from the top and go down, because that's obviously where people look to. But certainly when I'm doing sessions with staff, I always remind them that ultimately they're setting the tone for everybody else around them and for residents, and so they can't underestimate the value of how we all behave. And I appreciate the emphasis is on senior leadership in particular, but it's also the challenge, I think, when you see behaviour that's not okay, and having to pick that up, and where that gets seen and how that gets addressed is equally as important, I would say.
Because that's hard, isn't it? If to encourage people to challenge those behaviours that don't reflect culture, isn't it? That's the hard stuff.
And positively challenge, it's not a punitive frame, really. I think what's interesting is often people are very mindful of the culture when they're working directly with citizens. They can be less mindful when they're working with each other. And so there's something called, the inner and the outie, really, for those who have watched Severance recently.
I thought you were talking about belly buttons.
No, but otherwise we demonstrate that we can think well when we're engaging with external partners, whoever they might be. I think the real reflection when culture is embedded, it is a marathon, not a quick fix, to enable people to use those behaviours, model those behaviours without thinking internally. And you're right, Sue, it is about support and challenge.
So high support, high challenge, and I think certainly when you come to that kind of punitive culture, you've really got to be careful We have been doing some work about a just culture, because no one comes to work to do a bad job, do they, ultimately?
No.
So we've got a decision-making tree now to walk people through some of that, rather than just get very heavy-handed very quickly and take it to the nth degree, actually to stand back and think about it, which we're actually going to roll out a bit further, but within the organisation, because we found it successful. And I suppose it's having that, but you're always going to have some kind of, action, because you are managing performance, but equally I think it's on the other side looking at grievances, because you don't want too many of those and what sits behind that. Because generally if people are putting one in, they're doing it because they're not being heard somewhere. And listening is a really underrated skill, and that again is all part of a culture of an organisation, isn't it? If you put your head above the parapet to speak, then somebody should be listening and responding.
I'm interested though, back to your eating and outing, if I may. Do you think then that people are more mindful of their culture and how they want to behave when they're talking to citizens, and they take it a little bit more for granted internally? They don't feel like they have to work as hard? I mean, would that be fair?
I think that's probably fair, to be honest with you. I think that external challenge.
Because often people have as a value statement customer focused or citizen focused. So it's really interesting then. So people might pay attention there. They're often, I work with a lot of people who go out into people's homes, communities, and they're very mindful about how they operate and work. It's really interesting. You think about the legacy in and the traditions around local government and leadership. So once in the organisation, it's almost like I wait to be told, or and the evidence will be your grievances and your disciplinaries that are then invoked. So permission to have an engaging conversation, an empowering conversation that we would have with citizens. To actually model that internally. But it's the traditional model. If you think about school, waiting to be told, and being the naughty one at the back of the class or whatever we're doing. There's something about actually kind of breaking that really traditional model of leadership to think, well, actually, we can all manage ourselves, we can lead ourselves. We need a bit of direction for sure. But as Sue said, most of us want to do a good job.
It's like I said, there's a really good short by Ken Robinson that's an RSA, and actually they're drawing, and he shows about how education, when you really think about it, has not changed in hundreds of years, to be quite honest with you, and about we've got to think differently if we're going to get different. And if you think about the number of kids, whether it be NEET or whether some of the challenges now post-pandemic, we're going to have to change the way we operate, and AI, if nothing else, may drive that, but you'd like that to be in a positive way rather than perhaps a negative way.
I guess what it shows to us, if people can model that externally or with external stakeholders, then they can do it. It's just about permission often and expectation.
You talk a lot about we employ grown-ups, right? We're not employing children who don't understand this stuff. They're grown people who know this stuff. Right?
So it's simply kind of moving away from that really kind of parent-child model that people have often inherited and created unintentionally on the whole, to actually more adult conversations, just as we do with citizens.
I think it's also a bit of a generational thing as well. As you think about now, I think we're one of the first workforces to have five different types of generation working. So you can see some of that generational difference in approach, but it's taking the best out of all those pieces and putting them together, isn't it?
It's interesting. I mean, I don't want to talk about the pandemic particularly, but I was talking to one of our other shareholder members, and they were saying that because younger people, first time in role, are coming into this environment where there's hybrid working, they're coming into the office, they're not learning and picking up those kind of cultural cues from people who've been inside the organisation for a while, who a bit longer in the tooth, though I say that, that have that. They're not getting that sort of unintentional learning, and I think that's having an impact. I don't know whether you see that.
So we do have a minimum time in the office for those reasons, and we've been very clear as an organisation. Here's 20 reasons why you need to be in the office. And I have to say, in the main, I would say that's now shifting. So our minimum is 2 days. I mean, obviously, if you need to be more, you need to be more. But I would say that's moving, and people are generally more appreciating being in work now and being together, and actually meeting other people from other areas, particularly as we've mixed some of our buildings up, all that type of thing. So it's uncomfortable to start with, but it offers bigger and wider benefits.
And are you seeing that reflected in sort of that back to culture, that cultural piece. You know, is you know, do you feel more cohesive that now people are coming back into the office? Do you feel like that over the last few years that cultural piece has been harder, hasn't it? Because people aren't, can't engage in the same way they always have done. So it's that.
I would say so, and also just being able to see people, to be able to manage them, so you can read their body language and just have better conversations.
Yeah.
And it's not one size fits all, is it?
No.
Because you want it is an innovative way of working. There are times when it's absolutely appropriate for people not to be in within that, and similarly, you know, those what they call serendipitous moments when people come and you have the chat and so on. It's really interesting in terms of the work that we're doing, because the people have been delighted to have it's all in.
Yeah.
So it's all.
Yeah, you were very deliberate about that.
Very
you
deliberate.
Wanted it to be an
because
in-house.
of the point that Sue's saying. Actually, we need, the people in the room having the conversation, because it's a behavioural approach fundamentally, linked to performance outputs and outcomes. But actually, people have delighted in refreshing relationships or establishing new ones, because with the best will in the world, that's really challenging to do when you're online.
Yeah, and you get that same sort of feedback, Sue. It's part of the ODP, and Elizabeth, in a minute, you can just explain what that is. But are you starting to get that kind of anecdotal people that say it's really nice to be in the office? And
we are, and also people are having probably more challenging and more detailed conversations, but perhaps on a more personal, professional basis about, you know, how work is impacting on them, or what, you know, the course, etc. So it does generate those things. So therefore, people will hopefully work across more and develop much better, you know, kind of a wider network. And I think it certainly plays out amongst the senior leadership network with the sessions that we've done. Somebody jokingly said to me, because I've actually got these cards, so we mix the tables up every time everyone comes. So I've now got nameplates just to save me having to do a spreadsheet. He said, it's lovely that you've got the cards. I now know people's names I didn't know before. And you think, oh my God, how amazing is that?
how big is the leadership network?
It's about 55 odd people, I would say. Yeah.
But I don't think it's uncommon though, is it? Even, you know, it's a relatively, you know, that's a relatively
Yeah,
decent
because
sort of leadership
you've got
network,
everything
isn't it?
that would go from, you know, planning all the way through to, I don't know, registrars, for example.
And some relationships are incredibly well established pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And others, they don't know how tall they are or what kind of shoes they wear, because they've only ever seen them. You know.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's
Sort of waist
there's
up,
a bit of a shock,
Oh,
really.
you do wear trousers. How amazing.
That's interesting. So I think it's just, people are delighted in it, actually, despite the, you know, sometimes people, oh, is it easier to? It's always easier not to.
Yeah.
There's some really kind of bonus benefits to it, really. It's a relational world that we're in at the end of the day.
I think you have more honest conversations face to face.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And one of the things about the sort of the ODP program, you'll have to tell everybody what ODP stands for, is that, and you were keen on this as well, Sue, is that people are paired up, aren't they, across the duration of the program. So tell us what ODP is, and just and the rationale behind the kind of pairing people up.
So it stands for Owning and Driving Performance. So it's performance focused. We're all trying very hard to do our best. There's something about coming together. It consists of 5 waves, very structured and innovation combined to enable people to have similar tools and then use them in very different ways with each other. So it's a culture change program. And as I said, that is a marathon, not a sprint. You know, it's not a quick fix. You'd weave in your training, your development, your appraisals into it, your processes into it. But the core of this is culture shift, behavioural shift, as we began with. The peer-to-peers, people are networked across for 2 years plus with people that they don't know, people that they don't have a direct line of sight with. And that combines 2 things. One is about networking, which again has had some limits placed on it, as we talked earlier, given the context of a pandemic and hybrid working. So people are encouraged to meet for an hour a month to get to know people that they don't know, but are actually core in terms of their work and the system as a whole. For citizens. The second element of the peer-to-peer is they practice some of the skills and the tools that we offer when we're thinking about having engaging conversations with people. So in-time coaching, as opposed to a splendid coaching when I have a lovely hour, is a core component of it.
Interesting. And senior leadership buy-in is critical, isn't it, Sue, to all of these things? You're as chief people officer, you're part of that senior leadership team. how engaged have the SLT been? How supportive have they been to the programme?
Well, it started with their own 360s, so clearly, once they had those, and obviously the main things that came out across from that, that would kind of apply to all of us. So that feedback is, we have to kind of reflect on that.
Yeah.
So the next step has got to be, so we've got that, and what's the so what?
Right, yeah.
So the so what is ultimately, we clearly need to address, how we're aligning together, what our behaviours are, and how we put performance at the centre.
Yeah.
And we'd had a staff survey that kind of already flagged performance not being consistent, and a peer review that kind of reinforced some of that as well as some wider views on some levers and that we also had. And if you collect the data, you need to kind of triangulate that and put the whole thing together. Yeah. So I think the realisation that yes, you need to do something. And to be fair, they've got on board with it. Yeah. And we've been very careful to make sure there is senior leadership, throughout. Yeah. So people can see that, and it's very visible, and people are talking about it as well. Yeah. So my team know who I'm paired up with. Yeah. They've heard me talk about it. They've heard me. I do team brief for my service, so all of them, even the payroll clerks are familiar with it. They may not have to do it, but they understand that's going on and why.
They're starting to feel the impact of that, aren't they? Yeah, and it's nice you're talking about it.
Well, as a service, obviously, the people and culture team are supporting Elizabeth putting the whole thing together. We've got other bits and pieces that sit alongside it, like looking at appraisal, which we're doing over the next couple of years. We've just kind of refreshed and relaunched our values. We've split them, so there's a different set now for senior leaders, because people should expect more. We've done a whole lot of work on diversity and inclusion that members are very keen. Lands, shall I say, further and better. Yeah. So they accept there's been movement, but they want bigger and greater movement. So we're building that in. I then need to think about things like the employee relations team, how we manage that. What we're doing with their work, what our policies look like. All of which build up the organisational culture and our psychological safety.
Fantastic. And it's a long-term programme, so it'd be fantastic. We should make a note in our diaries as we come to an end that we should try and get together again in sort of 2 years' time, because it'd be really interesting, wouldn't it, to see. You're relatively new into this programme, and in a little while we'll start to get some really tangible stuff, which will be fantastic. So, listen, it's been lovely to talk to you, Sue, Elizabeth. Thank you so much indeed for your time, and thank you for watching and listening. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you.